All right, welcome back to the Roll Tide Rewind Draft Breakdown Series. We've reached the final video. We've gone through some of Alabama's top draft eligible prospects: Evan Neal, Jameson Williams, John Mechie, Christian Harris, Brian Robinson. And today we're going to wrap it up and bring you the best of the rest. Guys who still definitely will see get drafted or be some of the top undrafted free agents. But still, even if they're not drafted in the first or maybe some of them fall past the second or third round. Still want to give them some love, show them some appreciation for what they've done for Alabama, and just kind of spotlight what their strengths and maybe some room for improvement going forward into their NFL future. So we're going to start off with Phidarian Mathis. So Thomas and Cole, I'm going to let you guys take it away the majority of the time here. What do you think of when you think of Phidarian Mathis and kind of his legacy at Alabama and his NFL future?
The first thing I think of with Phidarian Mathis is Thomas's viral tweet where he he compared his stats to Jordan Davis's, and everybody liked it. But no, I think Phidarian Mathis is just a really solid player. I think he's a very good run defender. I think he's a decent pass rusher from the interior defensive line. I think he's just been a very productive player, especially last year and really throughout his whole career at Alabama.
Yeah, I think he hit I'm the one that sent the viral tweet, obviously, so I had an opinion there. But Fidarian had a very productive year last year. 53 tackles, 9 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. And like the big thing that I liked was he was a very vocal leader of the defense. Like he was voted a permanent team captain. So obviously he has a lot of respect from the players. And I always felt like he always had some like it was the heart of that defensive line. They had great games like against Auburn, against LSU, and even like they showed physicality when they played Georgia and teams with great offensive lines. I think with Fidarian, I feel like he is a day two guy, maybe a day three. I think a downside is he's 24 years old. I think that's obviously a downside with a lot of players. It's like they come in old, they're not going to be picked kind of as high. But like I said, I thought was very productive last year, and he's also a big man in the middle, and it's hard to block guys like that. So I would say day two, maybe early day three.
Yeah, everything I'm seeing, I'm actually very pleasantly surprised with how high he's supposed to go. Like I've seen some insider information, not that I've personally gotten, but that other people have gotten, and I've piggybacked off of that he might go in the second round. Like some people think he might even get drafted above Christian Harris, which surprises me. I've always thought of Christian Harris probably as a better NFL prospect than Fidarian, but I'd be shocked if he falls out of the third round. Honestly, I think he'll probably go on day two.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, from my time covering the team and just watching, really Phil over his whole career, I think of two things, and that's one is versatility. How he can play nose tackle and play right over the center, or he can really play a lot of different positions along the D line, and you can see that here in Lance Zierlein's overview, competing for early playing time in the league as a 4-3 or 3-4 nose tackle, or as a five technique defensive end. So the versatility, but also his character. He's just a funny guy, has a really good attitude, really good. I mean, just from watching him and listening to him, he's just a guy who loves football. I mean, Thomas, I think you alluded to it. The permanent team captain shows you how highly his teammates think of him, and just a really well-regarded guy. Kind of keeps everybody's spirits up in the locker room. Just generally a very pleasant guy, and just someone it's really easy to root for. So it's been great to see him kind of improve because early in his career, even though he was a four-star, he was not an elite recruit, but a really solid recruit and didn't play a whole lot early on. But to see him stick it out and just continue to hone his game and hone his skills over his career has been really nice to see. So I'm pumped for Phil. I'm excited to see kind of what his pro career develops into.
Mhm.
I've also never seen a defensive lineman referred to as having harmonious hands and feet. So hopefully that bodes well for his pass rush and his run stopping in the league.
I like it. One thing I did want to mention as a weakness is sort of I've seen multiple places that they don't think he's a like at least early in his career. A lot of people don't see him as much of a third down pass rusher, which kind of
Hmm.
surprises me. I mean, he had 9 sacks this year on the team with Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, uh, a bunch of I mean Christian Harris, who we've talked about, really good pass rushers. It very much surprises me that they don't think he's a good enough pass rusher to really be have an impact in that early in his career.
Yeah, I agree. I was a little surprised by that too. And looking at this comp, Daquan Jones, he's a guy. Whoops, he's a guy who hasn't really had much pass rush production in his career. I think he has 10 sacks in like 8 or 9 years in the league. Good player. I mean, he's been an annual starter. Has started basically every game since his second year in the league. Um, but yeah, I did notice that maybe they are not expecting the college pass rush production to carry over to the league as much, but hopefully it does, and hopefully he shows he can be kind of a three down lineman there and not have to come off the field on third down. And then moving on from Phidarian Mathis, we'll go on to Jalyn Armour-Davis here, a guy who didn't really play much early on in his career, kind of like Phidarian Mathis, came in that really highly regarded trio of defensive backs with Patrick Surtain and Josh Jobe. Had an early injury in his career and, was kind of the forgotten man out of that trio, but he really had his opportunity the last season or two, and uh, to me, maybe I was sleeping on him a little bit, but it seems like a lot of the draft experts are a little higher on him than I was expecting, which is good to see.
Mhm. I think it's the athleticism. I mean, we see it right there with the 40-yard dash. He ran a 4.39, which is very fast.
Yeah.
Vertical jump is solid. I think that kind of came out on film too. I thought he was a very good athlete. So I think that might be why more a projection.
I agree. I mean, he was at all SEC second teamer this year. Like you said, the 4.39. Also, him being 6'1", I think is an advantage because like some of these receivers are huge and big, and these 5'11", 5'10" corners, while they be really good, like 6'1" helps his cause there. He had 3 interceptions this past year. He had 4 pass deflections. I felt like some of the time he was picked on upon. Like I remember, I think it may have been the Tennessee game. He kind of got out of balance, and the receivers just blew right past him. But I mean, I feel like he was a pretty solid player. Like y'all were saying, like maybe late day 2, he could fall into day 3 maybe, but I feel like late day 2 is a good spot for him.
Yep. I think round 3 and 4 is kind of where you can expect him to go off the board somewhere in there.
I agree. I think the comparison here is interesting as well, Dre Kirkpatrick. I personally, not having not grown up in the Alabama sphere growing up in Virginia, I don't know as much about Dre Kirkpatrick's game. Maybe one of you guys do, and can kind of shed some light on that comparison. But I thought that was interesting, the Alabama connection there between those two.
Yeah, the Drake
Yeah, I
Kirkpatrick
mean,
kind of surprised me as well. I think Drake Kirkpatrick was a more productive player in his time at Alabama, and he's going to be he's drafted higher than Jalyn Armour-Davis is going to be. But I can see Drake Kirkpatrick always had good length, and he was a good athlete, so that part makes sense, I think.
yeah, I agree with Cole. It's the good athlete part because Kirkpatrick coming out of college was a very coveted prospect. I think mostly this comparison was made because they're both Alabama corners.
Yeah, that's very possible. This was interesting looking at the overview from Lance. 1 year starter from a Nick Saban defense with prototypical traits, but a lack of consistency in using them. He's long, fast, and talented, but is a developmental prospect, which is unusual for an Alabama cornerback. Which I definitely see what he means. I mean, a lot of times there's even a criticism of Alabama defenders, especially that they're almost too well coached in college to where they've reached their potential in college, and there's not much more room for growth. But it seems like maybe that isn't the case with Armour-Davis since he didn't play much early in his career. So maybe some more room to grow and some untapped potential that we don't typically see from Alabama DBs that have played a lot more football than he has in college.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like the first strength that's listed right there. His best football lies ahead of him. I 100%
Yeah.
agree with that. I think we've talked about the athleticism. I think he's got some technical stuff that he could really fix when we talk about weaknesses. But I think he will be a better pro than he was as a player at Alabama.
Yeah, and a lot of these weaknesses too, they're more technique things, which are definitely
Mhm.
things that can be refined, like a noticeable hitch when opening to sprint. That's easily fixable. Hip tightness, you can't do a whole lot about that, but eliminating a receiver's breathing room, a simple coaching point. So a lot of those things, his DB coaches, I think will focus on, and hopefully he can get a better handle on those.
Yeah. The big weaknesses, in my opinion, are the one season as a starter. That's kind of surprises me. I thought he was one of our better corners this year, so it surprises me not necessarily that he only started one season, but that like he almost never played in the prior 2 seasons. Like I'm surprised he wasn't able to get on the field at all. And then the other one that I saw a lot of places is getting his head around to find the ball, which is something that I've noticed with a lot of Alabama corners that they struggle with that, and that's definitely something I saw when I would watch Jalyn.
Yeah, I agree with the experience part because I think in his first few years, besides the injury, he was just a special teams player, and then like this year he plays over 600 or so snaps and deals with a few injuries as well. Ends up missing the national title game because due to injury, but I feel like the experience was it would be a weakness. But I feel like Cole said, he was one of our best corners this year. I felt like we missed him and Josh Jobe in the national title game.
Yeah, for sure. And Thomas, I don't know if that was intentional or what, but that was actually a perfect segue because Josh Jobe is our next guy we're going to go to. And I almost see him kind of similarly to Jalyn Armour-Davis. I mean, like very physically gifted. I mean, the height, 5'11" and a half isn't huge, but you talk to any of his coaches and they will tell you he's, strong. He's just he's got a good build. I talked to one of his high school coaches one time for a story, and he said just because of Jobe's physique, if he finished with a 10 or 12-year NFL career, he would totally not be surprised by it. Just has always been a very physically imposing type of guy. I know Alabama fans maybe are kind of up and down with him, which I understand, but with his backstory, which I can get into a little bit more in a minute, I'm definitely rooting for this guy. He's had a lot of things go against him in his life, and definitely hope he gets a shot to prove himself at the NFL level. But what do you guys
Yeah.
think of when you think of Josh Jobe, just kind of his Alabama career and maybe NFL future?
I think you kind of see it there in the overview, but he was a guy I was really intrigued to see this year as kind of our number one corner after kind of being the number two across from Sertan last year. But I thought he was a bit disappointing. I thought he was lost a lot in coverage. Thought he got beat deep multiple times. So I was a little disappointed with the senior season, which is kind of what that says. But overall, he's got the talent to get on the field a decent bit at Alabama. So I think he's going to get drafted. He'll probably be below Jalyn Armour-Davis, if I had to guess. More likely a day 3 pick, but I think he'll be an early day 3 pick, somewhere in the 4th or 5th round. So definitely going to get a shot in the NFL, but I think the senior season was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with Cole. Like, I feel like he had a good junior season, like where you saw potential of flashes. Like, I liked how he was a physical corner. Like, Sertan got all the love, but I thought Jobe had a good year. I thought he was pretty solid. And coming into the year, I thought he was our definite number one corner. But I felt like Armour-Davis was a better corner than he was this year. And I remember Joe being projected as like maybe a second round corner going into the year, and now it's kind of fallen off to a day 3 guy. But yeah, I agree with Cole. I think day 3, 4th or 5th round is where he's gonna land.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's also definitely surprising that now Jobe is projected to probably go behind Jalyn Armour-Davis. I think that would have seemed pretty shocking before this past season, but that's how it's shaken out. And this right here, I find really interesting. A move to safety might give him his best chance for future success. That was actually a move that he made in high school for really the reason that I mentioned earlier. He's just so physically imposing that his high school coach wanted to give him a chance to impact the game more consistently. If you're a lockdown corner in high school of the caliber that he was, they just don't throw at you. And then you're just over there and you're only eliminating one player. But because he was so physically dominant over the other players, his coach wanted to move him to safety so he could make more of a consistent impact play after play after play. And now, again, I mean, you see the strengths here. Play is marked by competitiveness and physicality, can impose his size and strength during the release, aggressive striker. These are all things that really could lend themselves to being a really effective safety. So I'm curious what his eventual role may be in the NFL.
Yep.
Yeah, the corner to safety. Sorry, Cole. The corner to safety thing is interesting because I feel like that's helped out a few guys, specifically Eddie Jackson. Now, I'm not obviously comparing Josh Jobe to Eddie Jackson, but we saw the difference it made when he moved from corner to safety, and he's one of the highest paid safeties in the NFL for a reason.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the strengths lend themselves well to safety. I think the weaknesses do as well. The biggest thing for me is tight hips. I thought a lot of times he was not very good getting out of breaks. But that's something that will be very helpful with a move to safety. Another thing, the mental mistakes on the outside can help as well if you move to safety.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential there. Whatever that best fit in the NFL ends up being, corner or safety. Hopefully he does land somewhere that can really put him somewhere where he can flourish. And I think just because of his background and the type of guy he is, anywhere with the kind of structure that Alabama has had will really help him. Because I mean, it's been somewhat well documented about kind of his rough upbringing, and he's kind of a shy guy. So definitely for his sake, hope that he can land somewhere that really helps him stay on the straight and narrow, and just helps him tap into all the potential that he has, because he has a ton of it. And another guy, kind of speaking of untapped potential, is Christopher Allen. We know the kind of talent that he has. When he's been on the field, he's been a very productive player, as we'll mention here in a second. But just because of some bad injury luck, he hasn't really always had a chance to show his abilities.
Mhm. Yeah, this is a guy that I would love to take a shot on late in the draft. I think he'll probably go late day 3 because we haven't seen much from him. But he actually led the SEC in tackles for loss in 2020, even on a team with Will Anderson. Like that's very impressive. He was very, very, very good in 2020. The injury cost him to miss the entire 2021 season, but I think there, like you mentioned, James, I think there's a lot of untapped potential there, and I think he's a good guy to take a swing on very late in the draft.
Yeah, I think another thing that speaks volumes is Alabama's linebacker room. Outside linebacker room last year had Will Anderson, who's obviously the starter and probably the best defense player in the country, and then you had Chris Allen, Dallas Turner, who looks to be a really promising player, and Drew Sanders, who's also another promising player. And Chris Allen started over both of those guys, so it shows you how good he was that Nick Saban gave the thumbs up for him to start over two very very talented players, and just a bad injury just caused him to miss the season.
Yeah, and looking at the overview here, I mean, Lance even calls him a physical specimen with a lot of strength to hold his own at the point of attack, discard single blocks with twitch and technique. So, I mean, you can see that those physical gifts and the untapped potential are showing up on film in the scouting community as well. But just and a lot of these things, you know, seeming lost in terms of play recognition and what he needs to do. I think that's just something that's going to come with more reps. Just more game reps. I think we'll definitely have the chance to. He'll definitely have the chance to improve that just as he plays more football games. It may sound silly to say that, but he's just been. I mean, right here, 2 injuries robbed him of a lot of valuable game experience. So hopefully, as he hopefully stays healthy, he can kind of improve on some of those things.
Yep. I think also the fact that he was a high recruit, all this about the strengths with the moldable upside as a pass rusher, premium physical traits. I think it's really showing that he could be very good in the NFL. We haven't seen it much in college. We saw it the 1 year in 2020 where he was very solid, but we haven't seen it a ton because of injuries. But if he were able to get that to where he's not getting injured as much, he could be a very productive NFL player, I think.
Yep, I agree. So definitely best wishes to him going on into his NFL career. Hope he can have some better injury luck and really show off those physical gifts, because, like we said, they are abundant. All right, and then our next guy up here is Slade Bolden. Guys, I'm going to leave this pretty open-ended because Alabama fans, I think a lot of them have kind of a rocky relationship with Slade Bolden. So what do you think of when you think of him? How would you describe his game and kind of his role in his career at Alabama?
I think he's a very smart player. I think obviously he has some physical limitations, but he's been a productive player at Alabama, more so than I think most people would have thought he would be. But I don't think he's going to get drafted. I think he's more likely to be picked up as an undrafted free agent. But I do think he gets too much hate for what he did at Alabama. I think he's been a solid player. I don't see a ton of NFL upside with him. I was very surprised he declared early.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Cole. Like I think he's either undrafted or maybe seventh round. I feel like a lot of reason Alabama fans don't like. I guess a lot of them have like a up and down relationship is because we've had all these talented wide receivers, and then like then there's Slade Bolden who doesn't have like a burst. As you see, he has a sits 40-yard dash. They just say he's just not as good as these guys, and then he drops a pass against Florida, and everybody wants him to be benched for the rest of the year. And
Yeah.
the one thing I liked about Slade, I thought I mean, some Alabama fans may hate this answer, but you can use him in a variety of ways. He's not just a slot receiver. You can we saw it in the national championship game against Georgia. There was a few plays where he ran from out of the backfield. We threw the pass to him. You can put him in motion. You can also they use him at punt return. They a lot of trust put him at punt return. You can also put him as a wildcat quarterback, as Alabama fans really love that formation. But as
Slade
I'm saying, you
Cat,
can use
baby.
I'm saying you can use them in a variety of ways. That's the first thing I think of Slade is he's not just a set position. You can move him anywhere around.
Yeah. The thing for me that scares me about his potential NFL upside is a lot of time when you get these guys that are kind of short and slow, it's hard for them to produce at all. But if they're going to produce, it needs to be in the mold of like a guy like Hunter Renfrow, where his feet are just incredible. His route running is
Mhm.
incredible. I don't necessarily see that with Slade. I think he's got good feet, but definitely not elite feet. And I think that could hurt him at the next level.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing that I do think helps him as a probable late draft pick or more likely an undrafted free agent is just the character. I mean, he's definitely a good locker room guy. You hear that from everybody who is asked about him that he's just very positive, has a really good attitude. And I think that helps when you're trying to make a roster. That and the versatility too that we just touched on, being able to contribute in a variety of ways, special teams, and just kind of being willing to at least experiment with different positions on the field, I think is definitely a point in his favor. And then finally, a guy who I would put in a similar mold to Chris Allen, very even a more highly ranked recruit for LaBryan Ray. Was a 5-star, even a higher ranked recruit than Tua Tagovailoa and Henry Ruggs and a lot of other really talented players, and just has had his career really sadly cut short by injuries. So,
Mhm.
been really unfortunate for him, but still has a chance to get drafted, and if not, maybe he can try to sneak his way onto a roster as an undrafted free agent.
Yep. LaBryan Ray is another guy that I don't necessarily see getting drafted, but I think he's probably got a little bit better shot than Slade does, just because you mentioned it. He's got the pedigree coming out of high school as a 5-star recruit. He's flashed a little bit when he's been on the field, but man, the injuries have just really hurt him, and it's really sad to see. I hope he's able to get that under wraps at the next level.
Yeah, I agree that the word I would use to describe LeBron Ray is just unlucky. Just a lot of bad injuries the past 3 seasons. And whenever he got to play, 2018 was the year I think he played the most. He played in all 15 games, as that player bio says. But near the end of the year, he started to become a really solid player for Alabama. He had against Auburn, he had 9 tackles and he ended up recording a sack. And then in the SEC title game against Georgia, he recorded another sack. So like he kind of got to his groove, and then the three injuries the past 3 years have really set him back.
Yeah, and I like this too. I like that Lance recognizes this, that even despite the injuries and not being able to
Mhm.
be super productive, he does have the size and the frame. I mean, like we said, he was a 5-star recruit. You don't get to be a 5-star recruit by being, way too big and you can't move, or being way too small and you're just not going to be able to play in the trenches. Like he's got the physical aspects of playing defensive line in the NFL. So that I mean that's really the biggest part. If you don't have that, then you just have no chance. So he has that foundational aspect. It's really just a matter of staying healthy. And if he does that, I think there's definitely a chance he can show what he has and sneak onto a roster and hopefully start to work his way up the depth chart over his career. But
Yeah, he's
yeah,
a guy that I'd
the
love.
injuries are the big story for him.
Yeah, he's the guy that I'd love to bring into an NFL camp, like you said, as an undrafted free agent, just to see what you got. It's tough to see. There's very limited film on him, so I think he's very much worth of bringing him in as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many NFL undrafted free agents have the upside that he does? Being former
Mhm.
5-star recruits who didn't even completely flame out. They've shown that they can be productive college players. So there's more upside on him than probably the vast majority of undrafted free agents. So definitely worth taking a shot on.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to wrap it up for our draft breakdown series. We've gone through 11 of Alabama's draft eligible players, from the potential top 5 draft pick in Evan Neal down to the guys who we see more likely as late round draft picks or even undrafted free agents. But uh, we've enjoyed getting to kind of shine a spotlight on what these guys have done in their college careers here at Alabama, what they do well, and what they have done well throughout their time in Tuscaloosa, and also what they could potentially bring to an NFL roster. So we appreciate you guys tuning in for all these videos. We'll definitely be looking to look for ways to improve the channel going forward. If you haven't already, give the new channel a subscribe and like and comment to the videos. We always love the feedback. So as always, we appreciate you guys listening. Go back and watch the videos after the draft, and maybe even as these guys get into their NFL careers, and let us know where we were right and maybe where we were wrong in some stuff too. So again, thank you guys for tuning into the Draft Breakdown series. Appreciate you subscribing to Roll Tide Rewind, and we'll be back with more content later on. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.